Okay, thank you. Hey, Moira, lovely to see you again and welcome. It's been a little while since we were working together, and so glad that you were willing to come back here and chat about your experience. It's pretty fun to see
Thank you for having me back. It
you.
feels like we spent most of 2025 together. So,
Yeah, it's kind of cool. And now we're here in 2026. So
yeah.
just to kick things off, maybe you could just tell me a little bit about yourself. How would you describe your drinking before we started working together?
I think I'm one of those maybe typical, professionally and personally successful people who sort of everything is perfectly perfect. And I think where the drinking was crowding things out was that it was like the only release valve. I was sort of using it as a way to sort of take the edge off, whether that was sort of, and I think what had happened is particularly post-pandemic is it just had become just sort of a daily habit. Not that I needed to have it. I never liked that language around it. I need to have a drink. Rather, it had just become a mindless habit that I was using it as this, way to, relieve stress, relieve overwhelm, and have it just take the edge off of the rest of the things that were going on in my life, good, bad, or indifferent.
Right. And had you tried other things before you came to me?
Well, yeah, I had done a number of dry Januaries and periods of abstinence, and those were fine. Um, they definitely gave me an opportunity to look at like, well, why does this have why does this have a place in my life, whether daily or otherwise?
Right.
You don't need it. Need is such a strong word. And as part of those exercises, um, I thought, well, this would be something that would be take a deeper look at.
Mhm.
Whether and I and of course I had seen you in the context of a dry January or a moderation management program.
Mhm. Okay. And then you had that kind of like sort of runway that you've been doing those things before, but then when you decided to reach out to me, why did you decide now was really the time to just, right, stop sort of doing these little bits here and there, but really make a change?
I think you'll remember me saying this to you that I kind of had this conversation in my head before we started. And I didn't know the answer, and I didn't know the answer to it, which is, am I asking the wrong questions here? Which is, um, you know, it just seemed like it really wasn't necessarily about the alcohol itself, and it really was about something else. And I really felt like I needed a more personalized, customized approach to it and thinking about it and working my way through it. And that was true.
Mhm. And then I remember this when we talked about goals. I always talk about goals with people. What do you want to achieve? And I remember some of the questions we had around that. Do you recall what kind of your desired end state was at the
Well,
end of that time?
I wanted to stop having kind of the mental battle. I wanted to stop kind of being tormented by the mental battle of it, like how much have I had to drink or how often I'm not a binge drinker. Like I don't, it wasn't, I didn't think that that was an issue. It was just sort of, I was just using it in a way that um, really wasn't serving me. And so that I think was my goal was to just
Mhm.
kind of stop um, having it be so mentally exhausting, I guess.
Okay. And then one of the things that I talk about quite a lot, and I think I remember we spoke about, and one of the things that happens in alcohol is if you have any kind of problem, people feel like they're being pushed to go to AA, go to
Hmm.
sobriety, you got to get help. This is poison. I mean, all of that. language, and my experience is that turns a lot of people off from actually even sort of doing anything. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the abstinence folks, there's a couple things in the abstinence slash AA people, which is the this is poison. Um, and the other thing, in the that always bothers me in the AA language is they give so much agency to the alcohol itself. They give it responsibility, like, well, this isn't your fault, or this isn't you. This is alcohol. This is something else, and that you are powerless is just it's just I think it's the wrong thing to say to people, because they already are getting knocked around by it. And so to say to them, well, you don't have any power or agency over this totally neutral thing outside of you. And then in the moderation folks, because I poked around a lot in some of those, podcasts and meetings. The moderation folks, it's a different kind of torment. It's like, well, if you're drinking five, drink four, like that's great, and it's like, well, like 4 glasses of whiskey is a lot. And if you're tormented by drinking 4 glasses of whiskey, you're not answering the problem.
Mhm.
Um, and so there, I think I know you'll remember the thing that you said, and in the presentation I saw you make was the idea of the battle, which is that if you're in a battle between doing something and not doing something, drinking versus not drinking, having 5 drinks versus 4 drinks, somebody's winning and somebody's losing, and you're both of them. And that was such a light bulb moment, which is that, like, I'm asking the wrong question. That's
Right.
sort of, I'm asking the questions here.
Okay. So that's kind of the preamble. And then so you reached out, we had a call, and you said, yeah, we're gonna do this, we're gonna work together. Taking you back to that moment when you made that decision, because I think this is where a lot of people they might imagine they want the result, they might even want the coaching, but it's right. That point when I decide, did you have any concerns or worries that kind of came up at that point for you?
Well, I mean, for me, where I have a tendency towards perfectionism, like I don't like starting things that I can't finish
Mhm.
or do completely. So I think I had put it off maybe for like 3 months after my initial contact with you. So it's like I felt like I didn't have the space and time for it,
Mhm.
in just like in my sort of mental life slash bandwidth. Um, so I think, but once I sort of, I'm a calendar person. So once I sort of had a calendar, it was, sort of like, that big, like, take a deep breath and jump in. I think but yeah, but you're absolutely right. It's for me as a perfectionist and someone who needs to start and finish tasks, like it had to fit in, like, I had to have a slot, that it could fit in. And I felt like I did when I finally called.
Yes. I think I remember we started on the first of a month as well.
Oh, that's
That
even that
was
even
kind of
has a
interesting.
nice ring to it.
I seem to remember that. All right. So as we went through the process, we talked a lot about planning and intention, and in doing this, building trust in ourselves, right? Which is, for me, it's like the underlying thing. Because if we don't, because a lot of the time we get into difficulty, we really don't trust ourselves. We can put in a plan and say, oh, well, I don't think I'm going to do that. So we kind of let ourselves off the hook. So we wanted to build that level of trust. So we will end up doing what we say we will around alcohol in the same way we do with many other areas of our life. So how did that come through for you? How did planning and being intentional, how did that help you? What were your thoughts around that?
Well, I think for me, I mean, the planning was very revelatory, like, because sometimes one of the things with planning or scheduling, or like, it was that, like, gosh, like, I don't need any more work here. Like, I already have a lot of work. But the other thing that was true is, it's related to the work issue, is like, why am I giving this much space in my day? Like, why am I like And the planning is important because it's the truth, right? It's, well, there it is on paper. This is uncomfortable, why, well, how many, glasses of wine are you going to have on a Friday night? Well, I don't know. Well, and that's uncomfortable, that sort of being under the magnifying glass like that, and I think that discomfort is what kind of leads to the progress, because like, oh geez, like this is taking, not as if this only as this work, it's taking up space and time, but geez, it's just, this is taking up a lot of my energy and focus.
Right. And that level, that thing, I know we spoke a lot about discomfort and kind of and the desire, right? When we have desire coming and we have the urges and so much around this is it can become very dramatic. We can be living in these very dramatic stories for ourselves.
Yeah.
And then when we kind of cut through some of that, and like you say, see the truth, see the numbers, see the facts, then decide ahead of time what we want, that kind of neutralizes a lot of that drama. Tell me about that a little bit, how that was for
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I love what you said about the stories, because I think when until somebody, turns the mirror around and you see it, you don't realize that how much of it is self-created, right? I mean, um, with regard to, for example, kind of that end of the day,
Mhm.
stress, overwhelm. And when you really start to look at it, and it's like, well, it just is, right? It's just uncomfortable. It doesn't need to be solved. And you know learning how to kind of just get through, not sort of get through it, so to speak, but just recognizing it for what it is and realizing that it doesn't need a solution or a resolution, um, really helps with that, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And I know we spoke a lot about this. It just is. And I know there were some mad, crazy things that were happening. We had some circumstances as we were working together, and it's like, okay, that just is. That doesn't require me to then drink in response to
Right.
this. Was it the
Yeah.
tornado or something? I mean, we
Um,
had these.
yeah. We actually had a tornado in the part of the world that I live in that does not have tornadoes. Yes, and when it was objectively dramatic, right?
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, that's, I think, and to not have the reflex be like, I I just need something to just take that edge off. And it's like, well, no, it just is. And you have to,
Mhm.
find other ways to get through it, without that.
Mhm. So, how would you describe your drinking now or your relationship with alcohol, however you want to talk about that?
I think that for me, the biggest benefit of the work that we did together was giving me better tools for dealing just
Mhm.
with, I think I had really, there's sort of like really two themes. One was sort of the release and overwhelm, and the other theme was sort of um, needing or wanting kind of mundane situations to have a little bit of sizzle to them, having something be special. And to me, the work around both of those two things, just with kind of, for me, in terms of my mental health, or how I deal with situations, that to me is where I felt like huge leaps in progress.
Mhm.
Um, and the alcohol and the wine was part of that, right?
Mhm.
It was a big part of those situations, and now I feel like it's really not. Like I feel like um it's I don't even know if it's sitting in the back seat. It's just not. I just feel like it doesn't have that constant sort of nag and presence, in my daily life.
Right. And one of the things I talk about as that happens, right, as that process happens and that recedes, and we stop. I remember one of the things talking, because I know you used to like drink the very fancy wine, and we started to see so the number of bottles that you had available, it sort of was growing in the cell because you weren't drinking it, and it's like, it's there. And as that starts to recede, how we see ourselves and what we're able to do with our lives and changes, right? And I always talk about it being the door to a bigger life, and we just stop having this nagging worry, and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, a couple of things, the sort of getting rid of that sort of nagging, why, having it not take up so much, energy, mental energy and focus. But more importantly is that the space that opens up, and whether it's literally just time on the calendar, like, oh, this would be a time, when I would likely have had one or two glasses of wine. Classic example is like a Friday night,
Mhm.
or a Sunday, early afternoon lunch. Like I would have had one or two glasses of wine, and really the day is over at that point, right? I mean, but in the absence of doing that, this sort of space opens up for other things, but for someone like me, like space and time is uncomfortable because I feel like I need to be doing something. Well, now what do we? Okay, well, now what am I going to do? I'm not cleaning a closet on a Friday night, right? I don't want to do that, and I don't want to do that necessarily on an early Sunday afternoon. Although I probably should. I could use some closet work. Um, but one of the things that we talked about is like it's okay to just sit there and do nothing. Like it's like let the boredom happen, because that's where you find the space to work on and think about other things. And that and I think that was really a big change for me.
Yeah, yeah. High achieving, productive, always on the go, attached to your calendar. I do remember we do use the word space a lot as we started.
Yeah. Well, because I, I actually I have this a recurring dream that I have is that I find this other room in our house, and there's two things in that dream. One is that, like, wow, look at all this extra space that we have, but invariably when I open the door and I see the room, it's full of garbage
Yeah.
stuff, like it's cluttered, right? And so but I think the idea behind the space is that it gives busy, high achieving people something. It just gives a lot of relief because it's like, okay, like I don't have to be going 24/7, thinking 24/7, doing 24/7. Um, and
Right.
so yeah, I've been trying to drink tea like a man, which is that story you told me about your parents, which is lovely. Yeah.
So good. So, Maura, what do you think, if you had to say one thing, what has been your favorite thing about this work and about the transformation you have achieved? Is there like one thing?
I mean, I feel so much better, which maybe sounds like an uninteresting response to that question. But I think you know the the pandemic, and then we just had things after things after things in our personal life that we were just at this like really high level of stress and overwhelm for a long time. And I think the alcohol, I think the wine I just think I wasn't causing it. It just wasn't helping either. And I think that's, having that be really a much smaller piece of sort of my life has just helped in every other way. Um, and that's what I think is so important about this work in particular versus just days counting or drinks counting, which is really meaningless in the absence of working on all the other things. It's the days counting, the drinks counting is helps. It's a good tool when you're examining what's going on in your life, but it doesn't really get to any other things that is important to think about or work on when you're trying to improve this aspect of your life, I think.
I think it's a tremendously joyous answer you just gave that you feel better,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think if we just say you can then that filters out into all other areas of your life, just as I often talk about with alcohol, when we really feel like, oh, why can't I get control over this? It's kind of like the body of the spider that sits, that has tentacles in all areas of your life. So we
Yeah.
remove that. So I love that you feel better. So
Yeah.
guess final couple of questions. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. I mean, a really part of my mission I see is to just change the conversation on alcohol, that this is nothing to be ashamed of, worry, all of that stuff, feel guilty about that society does. So having lovely people like you come on to talk about that really helps. And what would you say, Maura, to someone who is listening to this and they're thinking, oh, that sounds good. I want that result, but I really worry, is it worth it? And will
Mm.
it work for me? Which is kind of like the number that one, will it work for me? That's like the core worry I see. What would you say to that person now?
I think that I think that if you it's making a commitment to just pay attention to yourself once a week is really the way to think about going into it versus I'm going to stop drinking or because that to me it's really that's what it felt like to me versus some sort of alcohol program. You know what I mean? It really I felt like the weekly work was really just working on myself and that the alcohol and the drinking, the wine was just part of it. And I don't think there's anything better than that, which is working on yourself. I had never been a therapy. I'd never been in therapy or been to a therapist. So um, it was a new experience for me.
Mhm.
But it really felt like more like working on myself in every way and including the drinking aspect. Um, and I think that if you approach it that way, there really is and isn't anything better than you can do for yourself. And I will say that there were mornings where I was really grumpy going into it. Like I don't. Do we have to talk about me and everything for another day, another hour this week? And every single week, I felt so much better at the end of it. I mean, just and so and so and yes, there's a little bit of discomfort, but there's also a lot of joy in the progress. And you, Anna, in particular, you're just this really terrific, supportive cheerleader and advocate for your clients. I think you feel like you have somebody in your corner, which is a wonderful way to feel about anything, not just about drinking in particular, but just about like your overall mental health.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing. I mean, that is right. That is the goal that just, it's actually always really interesting. I say to people that the amount of time we actually spend talking about alcohol is not huge, oftentimes,
Agreed. Yes, totally agree. Yes,
because
it's
it's
so
all the
true.
other things, right? That is just kind of the result of so many things. So super duper. So I guess that's really what I had here. Is there anything else you want to say, Maura, that I didn't ask you about that you have this burning desire to mention?
I don't think so. I don't think
Okay.
so.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, I wish you a fantastic 2026 and don't be a stranger.
I won't. I won't. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Maura. Okay.